not. It's just, they're just killing people. That's all. Like everything else they do. I haven't been to a doctor in over 20 years, and I haven't been sick in over 20 years.
Okay, let's get started. Welcome. If I can just ask people to mute themselves for the start of this. Welcome to this third session, actually, that Shem Allenson has agreed to do. So Shem is basically representing, well, she's working with the, everything's gone from my head now. She's working with the Common Law Court, and she's doing these webinars voluntarily, just to allow normal people like you, me, and ourselves to work out how they can basically come away from the system. Okay, now just to introduce ourselves, my name is Richard Shepherd. This is my partner, Ella Gorman. We are in the process of setting up mandatory vaccinations because we're very concerned that during this current crisis of coronavirus, that our children and ourselves are going to be forced to undertake a vaccination. So what we believe is that using the common law system, we can come away from this process and basically exempt ourselves. So Shem has kindly agreed to do these series of webinars. We've already had two. We do have the downloads to them if you haven't been able to tune into those two downloads. What I'm going to do right now is just go welcome Shem, who's going to go through today how to come away from the tax system.
Right. Well, we'll start the process, Richard. Yeah. It'll probably take several sessions to get you fully conversant with it. It has taken me 6 or 7 months, but hopefully you won't make the mistakes that I've made. So that's the whole idea.
Somebody just arrived.
Would you like to let me? Right, I'll just share my screen, guys, if that's okay. Let's just make sure I've done that. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up, Richard, if you can see that. Just make sure I'm sharing it. Okay, thank you. Right, okay, so what we're going to talk about this afternoon is we're going to talk about using common law to exit the government tax system. Sorry, just excuse me one second.
Just wants to know where the slabs go.
Excuse me 1 second. Sorry, I never expected an interruption.
Can they tell us? In the wood. In the wood. In the wood at the top.
Right, I do apologise, guys. You can guarantee someone will turn up at your door at the least opportune moment. Okay, right, someone's dealing with that. Okay, so what we're going to look at this afternoon is we are going to look at how you will actually start the process of exiting the government tax farm. So today's talk is going to be really about the order in which you will do things, and I've kind of given you a step-by-step how to go about it. We're not going to look at the whole thing because really you need to do things in a specific order, and you actually need some background knowledge to enable you to do it. If you're starting from scratch, it's actually quite difficult to do it. So that's what we'll start this afternoon. Of course, if anybody needs anything sooner than I've provided it, then of course I will be quite happy to, you know, just send me an email and I can send you out some sample letters, that kind of thing. So as always, let's just make sure my screen's working. Yep. I have to say that this is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not a lawyer. I have no law qualifications. So please do your own research. Okay. Some useful resources. You have seen these before. Okay. And I've put up some other things for you to have a look at on here as well. One is the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Now, it's worth you having a look at that because we haven't actually covered this one just yet. Okay, because there might be some things in there that you can quote or comment on in your letters. There's also a link to the Bill of Rights. That is actually quite hard to understand, so I've tried to give you a little bit of the history in sort of more layman's terms to have a look at as well. So you don't necessarily need to include any of that information, but it is quite useful to know about it. Now, court cases that are useful. This one is especially useful, and I would urge you all to go and have a look at it. This was a declaration of the superior authority and jurisdiction of the common law court, and it was issued on the 6th of April this year, and it was sent to world leaders and heads of state on the 6th of April 2020. Now, they've had a month to reply, and none of the world leaders have come back to challenge this. I believe it went to, I think, 130 world leaders, and none of them have challenged it. Now, what that means is it means that they're agreeing that the common law court has superior jurisdiction to the statutory courts. So you can quote this in your literature, okay? So do have a look at that, download that document, have a look at it, and feel free to quote that in your letters. When it comes to government, there's one thing that you have realised now is that we have the power to stop government once we understand how it works. And you'll remember I said that what we actually need to do is step off the plank, okay? And we're about to start doing this. In common law court, we aim to use lawful remedies that are recognised in the courts, and of course we must remain in honour at all times. So, what order are we actually going to do this in? Now, doing things in the correct order is really very important, because if you don't do this in the correct order, you can actually end up having to write more letters, and you will end up backtracking and repeating yourself a lot of times. So by trying to do it in the correct order, it will make it a lot easier for you. So the first thing I would suggest, I'm presuming that most of you will have now done this, and that is to get your common law court card and to get your birth listed on the common law court website. If you have any difficulty with that, please do come back to me. My email is there, and just email me and request a Skype or a Zoom consultation, and I can try and talk you through that. The common law court website, sorry, just excuse me again, my guest has locked herself out. Sorry. Many apologies, guys. These things always happen when you do something live, you can guarantee it. Okay, right, so take ownership of your legal fiction would be the next step. Now, you need to do that because when you write your letters, you are going to need a photocopy of your common law court card, which will look something like that to include with your letters, okay? You will get something like that. You may have to include a copy of your birth certificate. That's a rough copy of mine, okay? And you will get that in the post. You get them in a nicely bound wallet. And depending what it is you're contesting or claiming, you might actually have to have copies of your deed documents. The deed documents will say things like, you know, this, I think this is my land registration one, or not the land listing, sorry, with common law court. And if like me, you want to run a company from home, you can actually do the same and get your company listing as well. So you can actually run a company from home. You don't have to go through company registry, particularly if you're a one-man band or you're self-employed. You can do all of that under common law and keep government out of it. Okay. Now, on the Common Law Court website, you can order your Common Law Court card, you can order copies of your legal fiction paperwork and the other paperwork, and this will be sent to you in the post. Once this arrives, take plenty of photocopies of everything, because I can guarantee you will actually need those photocopies to include in your letters. Now, next thing to do, and I would advise you all strongly to do this, is to get yourself organised before you start doing your letters. And the first thing you actually need to do is get out all your paperwork, list all your government tax and revenue, all the tax and revenue services that you deal with, gather all your invoices and all your paperwork, and create a very neat, ordered, labelled file with everything in date order. Okay? Now, trust me when I say this is the most important step that you do, because if you have to write as many letters as I have, I'm hoping you won't have to, but if you have to, you need to be organised. So start by organising your paperwork, start by getting a big file to put all your paperwork in. My files now are about that thick, okay? I'm hoping by you doing them in the right order that you'll be able to keep it that thick or thinner, but get yourself organised. Please, 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 you'll save yourself a lot of time. The next step is to remove yourself from the electoral register. I'll show you how to do that in a second. It's very easy to write and to ask, but it's not so easy to make them do it. And then I would say, have a go by starting with something simple like your smart meter installation. Try and get yourself off having a smart meter, unless you've already got one. If you've already got one, it's actually not so easy to get it removed. But we'll look at some letters for that today, for how to actually go about doing it. Then I would say, write to each department that you have a payment record with. And when you write as a living man or a living woman. So this is not a notice letter. You'll see what I mean by a notice letter in a minute. But it uses the same format without the word notice at the top and the bottom. Now, I'm going to show you in a minute what the top of your letters should look like and what the bottom of your letters should look like, so that they're consistent through every letter and so that you don't accidentally create joinder. You will remember that joinder is the term that we use for entrapment and entrapping you into the statutory jurisdiction. So it's very important that you don't create joinder when you're writing letters, okay? Something else you need to do when you're writing letters and requesting the information from them initially is to make sure you include any account numbers and reference numbers so they can easily track down your information. Also, when you get all your information back, check everything against bank statements to make sure that you have completed information. Now, the reason that I want you to do this, it's for your own protection, because if for some reason government lose your records, you might actually need it. You might need access to this information. And if, and I do say if, at some point in the future, there's ever a point where we can claim some of this back, the paper copy might be the only copy of this information that you have. So get copies of everything. So try to get copies of all that you've paid in national insurance, everything you've paid in income tax or tax, get details of all your pension information, wages, council tax rates, water, electric, gas, and so forth. And also particularly for your mortgage payments. So make sure you've got all the backdated information that you need. It's all nicely organized in a big file and it's handy. You will need access to that. Now, before you start to exit the system, there's something else that I think you really should do, and this is to think very carefully about your current financial situation. Will you need access to furlough benefits or grants? Okay. If you do, or you think you're likely to, I think it would be best to do that first before you start to exit the government system. Because I think otherwise criminal coercion is likely to be used against you. You'll notice that I've crossed out the word may, and instead I've put likely to. Okay, and this is because I have found a few people who've gone through this process, have then gone back to government, and they've applied for a grant, and the government has said, well, no, you're not getting this grant, you're not getting this furlough because you owe us 4,000 in arrears for your tax, and so on. Okay. So if you do think you're going to need a grant or a benefit or furlough, apply for this first, try and get that out of the way first before you then start to exit the system, because then it's quite difficult for them to actually cut you off. They can't actually cut you off as easily, I believe. Okay. Another thing to think quite carefully about is if any of your payments are shared, make sure that you both discuss and agree a plan of action. Because with shared payments, there may well be some agreement in place that you need to be careful about. And one thing I found you do have to be careful about is joint mortgages. And the reason for that is if you manage to get yourself off the system from the mortgage point of view, and you manage to get out of paying your mortgage payments because you prove it unlawful, they may well, the mortgage company may well go after the other partner. Okay, and they may make them liable for the rest of the payments. So think quite carefully when you do this and agree it and discuss it between you. Okay. Right, next one. I think the next thing to probably do is to try and locate any property or land deeds for your property and go to the deeds and sale declaration page of the Common Law Court website. If you have a solicitor who holds your deeds, or an office that holds the deeds, or someone else who holds the deeds, get copies of your deeds beforehand, and you will need a copy to upload as a file as well to the Common Law Court website. When you're entering any details on the Common Law Court website, make sure you include the full details of all the owners and the exact percentages owned. So upload a copy of all the deed documents and any supporting paperwork. Now note that this doesn't include mortgage paperwork, because actually the mortgage company, despite what they will tell you, don't own anything. You do. You don't need to upload the mortgage paperwork, but you certainly will need a copy of any deed documents and any agreements that you have in place if there's more than one of you who share a property, for example. When you're completing the document, you may, online, you may, for example, put Victoria Banks owns 75% of this property, Tommy Banks owns 25% of the property. It actually doesn't matter, but remember that you must behave with honour at all times and you must record this information accurately. If you are later found out to be guilty of fraud and you enter the wrong information in there, the document will not help you, and actually neither will the Common Law Court. So please make sure that the information is correct. The next step is probably to get yourself off the electoral register, and you would think this is quite straightforward, but actually I've found this is one of the toughest things to do, and you would not believe how many letters I had to write to get off. So those of you who've already managed to get off with one letter, congratulations is what I have to say to that, because it was a terrible challenge for me to actually get myself removed. I did in the end, but it took a 4-page letter to a solicitor, one of their solicitors, to actually get myself removed. Okay. If you want to remove yourself off the electoral register, what I would suggest you do is use the notice letter format I'm coming to in a minute, but just don't use the word notice at the top. Write to your local civil servant who deals with the electoral roll and request to be taken off. Now, it's best, if you can, to request the removal of your entire household and to ask for confirmation in writing. You might need to get hold of a local phone number and a name first through the council. Make sure all your letters go signed for, and make sure you keep a copy of every letter. Very, very important. Every letter you send, keep a copy and send it signed for. Now also, if it goes signed for, you will get a little postage slip for it, something like that. It's like that in the UK. Okay, make sure you keep those and make sure you staple it to the letter concerned, because otherwise by the time you've finished you will get them lost, you will get them mixed up. You do need to be very organised.
Sorry,
now, sorry, Richard.
Question. Somebody's just asking, should they put the word notice on top of the electoral register or not?
For the electoral register one, probably yes. When you're giving them information you want them to act on, I would say put the word notice in great big bold letters. Okay. If it's just a simple request for something like, can you give me a complete list of all my mortgage payments so far? In that case, probably not. Okay. So a request, no, but if it's a notification of something you definitely want them to do, put the word notice in big bold letters at the top.
Great, thanks for that.
Okay. Right, now, your land or property should be listed with Common Law Court first before you try to exit land registry and council tax, and there's a very good reason for this. I did it in the wrong order, which meant more letters. If you do it in the correct order and get your property listed with the Common Law Court first, it is much easier to then exit land registry and council tax, because the property is then yours. They don't have the authority to do anything with it. I think when I was doing this about 6 months ago or whenever it was, I hadn't quite got it in my head how I was doing this and the order I was doing it in. So just take my advice and trust me when I say do the Common Law Court bit first, and then it's much easier to get out. With Land Registry, use the notice letter format because you're sending them a notice. Make sure you send it to a named individual if you can, and inform them that the land or property has already been transferred to the common law court land listing and that it's under new ownership. Tell them to remove the property from their listings, and I've got an example of a letter to show you exactly how to do that. Always ask for confirmation in writing, and again, I've got some examples of these things. Now, once you've taken your land over into the common law court listing, then you can proceed with the next step, which is to remove yourself from land registry and council tax. Now, let me just reassure you of something first. When you list your property with common law court do not take ownership of your property. They do not have any say in your property. It is actually nothing to do with them. It is just a declaration that the property is yours and only yours. Okay? You are the sovereign owner of that land. You own the sky above it, and I believe you own a depth of soil below it. It is not common law court's property, it is your property. Did you have a question, Richard? Sorry.
Yeah, just somebody's just asking you, if you remove your house from the land registry, would that prevent you from selling it in the future?
No, it doesn't. No, definitely doesn't. And I'll cover that in a minute as well. Okay. You want your property out of land registry. The reason you want your property out of land registry is if it's in land registry, really the property belongs to the Crown Corporation. And that means they can do things like compulsory purchase orders. Okay. It means they can send you council tax bills because actually it's their property. It means if you decide to sell it, they can make you pay stamp duty and so on. Okay. When it's your property, it is actually yours and you are the sovereign of your own property. You're sovereign of your property, your land. You can say who comes and goes. You have the right to put up a shed on it. If you wish to put up a shed on it, you don't have to ask them for permission. It's your property. Now, once you've done that, let common law court know so that we can have any unlawful payments assigned to that property removed, such as tax rates, mortgages. And I believe, I'll have to check that with John, but I believe what he does is he sends a letter to land registry to have those taxes removed. I'll have to just double check that with him. I think that's what he did with mine. Don't stop paying, do not stop paying your council tax and your mortgage because you must behave with honour. We have to write to those guys first before we challenge them and stop paying. Does that make sense, folks? Yeah, okay. Now, when we do our removal requests and you ask to be removed from various things, don't let anybody tell you that they can do things like stop your electric, your water, your sewage services, your refuse services, your benefits, or remove you from council housing, because actually they can't. You are entitled to all of those. I think council housing might be an exception if you actually destroy the property or really upset your neighbours or something along those lines. But otherwise, I think all of those services are your entitlement, and I don't think they can take them off you. They certainly can't stop things like your bin services just because you haven't paid a specific bill. So just to reassure you on that one. Now, a little reminder, remember they're going to use criminal coercion against you. They will. They've tried it several times with me. They threaten you with legal action. They threaten you with prison or fines. The vast majority of it is hot air if you know how to deal with it. So be prepared to deal with the hot air. If you're concerned about it, just come back and have a quick word with us. If you are all concerned, and we'll be very happy to talk to you about how to deal with it. If in any doubt when you're replying to these things, just let us have a quick look over your letters and just make sure that you haven't created joinder. We can do that in a few seconds because we are now so used to looking at these letters, we will know if you've put your foot in it. All right. Feel free to ask us, we really don't mind. So how do you write your letters? Let's get on to the nitty-gritty of it. So the top and the bottom of most of your letters is actually quite straightforward, and it will be identical for virtually every letter that you send. So looking at the top, you will put your address in there somewhere. You will put their address in there somewhere. When you put their address in, make whoever it is you're actually writing to, okay? Put the date, always write the date in full. So you would actually write, for example, 27th January 2020. And the reason that you do that is to make it harder for anybody to fiddle with the evidence at a later date. Okay. Write to dear and use a first name. Try to get hold of the first name of the individual you will be writing to. This is not so important for an initial please remove me letter, but certainly for any replies. If you are doing any replies to anyone, try to get the first name in there. And the reason that you want the first name in there is because you want a named individual who can be held personally liable in their private capacity. Okay? So don't address it to Governor, Mr., Mrs., Miss, and so on. Address it to Dear Philip, Dear Graham, Dear Sarah, if you can. Okay? The word notice is not required for simple information requests, such as the national insurance payments to date, but you would be required to put that for something like, please remove me from land registry listings. You'll then put the body of your letter, which we'll talk about in a minute. Remember, with any letters, there's a few things that you don't want to associate yourself with, because those things can create joinder. And you'll remember that this word joinder means join, and they're trying to join you up to statutory jurisdiction. So you don't want to create joinder. So words to be careful of, particularly when you receive these, are occupier. You are not an occupier. Owner, elector, you are none of these things. You don't want to be any of these things. Person and citizen. The word person is actually means a corporation, and it refers to the straw man. You are not a person. You don't wish to be a person. And incidentally, you don't wish to sign any of these petitions where you're claiming to be a person or a citizen. Okay. Both of those things are joinder. Or create joinder. When you sign off your letters, at the end of your letter, you would put a yours sincerely if you have a named individual up here. If you don't have a named individual, you would actually put yours faithfully. For example, if it was sir or madam up here. But I'm hoping that for most of your letters, you will have a named individual, dear Philip, and you will put yours sincerely. You will then sign it with your first name, CLC. So with my letters, I would sign it Shem, CLC, or you would sign it Kevin, CLC, or Sabrina, CLC. Okay. You could, if you prefer, you could write your name, and you could write it as, for example, Shem of the family Allenson, if you prefer to do that. I would then put more detail underneath, so I would put Shem of the family Allenson, or I could put : Shem space : Allenson, because that also denotes the living woman or the living man. And then I will finish my letter off by actually saying, standing solely under the jurisdiction of the common law court. So they are actually left in absolutely no doubt that this is common law court jurisdiction. This is not statutory court jurisdiction, and we are not dealing with them under the statutory jurisdiction. Okay? Don't put your foot in it before you start. Pay attention to these little details because they keep you out of all sorts of mischief. Any questions before we carry on, Richard? Anybody want to ask anything before we go to the next step? No? Okay. Right, let's move on. So, for example, now I'm going to start you off with a simple letter. This is one just to gain a bit of confidence. This was a letter I used to stop smart meter installation, just to give you an idea of how to write one. Stopping your smart meter installation, if you haven't had one put in already, is actually quite straightforward, and this is how I did it. So I put notice at the top, the usual top and the usual bottom of the letter. Notice what it's about, smart meter installation, my property number, my customer information, and I put, I'm EMF sensitive since 2017. You don't, of course, have to put that. They, by the way, if you claim to be EMF sensitive, by the way, they are not allowed to ask you for proof of that. They have no right whatsoever to access your medical records. So you can put what you like up there, okay? And I have reviewed a considerable amount of information on the web and believe smart meters to be a health risk, a fire hazard, and a security risk. They also breach my human and unalienable rights. I strongly object to any tracking or monitoring technologies. My privacy is important to me. For these reasons, I do not consent, trying to get those words in, to having a smart meter installed on my property or any meter that uses Wi-Fi or radio frequencies either now or at any point in the future. So we are being absolutely clear, we're not having it, okay? I would also like to advise you that should any attempt be made to install a smart meter or other Wi-Fi or radio frequency emitting device, I will consider this to be an assault on my individual body and an infringement of my rights. The installer and other post holders within, whatever the company name is, will be held personally liable in their private capacities. Now that means we could take those individuals to a common law court and prosecute them. And this is why you need a first name up here, and we need to actually state they can be held personally liable in their private capacities. I will also be placing, and I've done this, it's on my meter, a laminated notice on my meter box so there can be absolutely no misunderstanding. And the laminated notice is coming up in a second. Now, when I first did a letter, I got loads of phone calls from the office trying to persuade me that smart meters were safe, they weren't an intrusion into my privacy. She tried about 6 times. So if I were you, I would actually put, there will be no further discussion on this matter, unless of course you love answering time wasting phone calls. They're very, very persistent. This version of the letter I find stops it. I've had a few people use this and they've stopped it blank. Okay. Now, because we want to behave with honour and we're being absolutely reasonable, I've also put, I will be placing, I have no objection to having my meter read and will happily provide you with regular meter readings should you wish. Please confirm receipt of this notice within 7 days. Thank you. Because we'd like them to write back to us and say, yes, Shem, we've got your notice. We will make sure we don't install a smart meter. Sometimes they do reply, sometimes they don't. And of course, if they don't, this is why you need your little signed proof of posting and a copy of your letter saying that it went. Because if it ever goes to court, that, guys, is your proof. Okay. Now, if you're sending notices to large companies, I would perhaps also put notice to principal is notice to agent, and notice to agent is notice to principal, if you wish. What that actually means is if you're sending it to one person within an organisation, you would like them to pass that information on to everybody else to whom it is relevant. And that's what that little phrase means. Okay. I'm not sure whether it's actually really required, but it seems to be what people do. Now, for my meter box, what I did for my meter box was I actually put a big notice on my meter box. It's laminated. It's right there in their faces. If they claimed they couldn't see it, they'd have to be daft. I've also taken a photograph of it to keep for my records, just to prove that it's actually there. So I've got proof that it's there. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust these guys. And it says, notice of liability to staff and contractors. I'm EMF sensitive since 2007, etc. I do not consent, I've used those words again, to having a smart meter, etc., etc. And I would like to advise you that should any attempt be made to install a smart meter, etc., I will consider this to be an assault on my individual body and an infringement of my human rights. The installer and other post holders within the company will be held, most important, personally liable in their private capacities. And remember, we need to put that in because then you can take them to a common law court. I have no objection to having my meter read, of course, and should you prefer, I will happily provide you with meter readings by email. Yours sincerely, and the usual finish. Okay, so that's how you get out of a smart meter, guys, and it works. Next one, let's have a look at the electoral register. Now, this is a little bit harder. Yes, sorry, Richard, carry on.
Yeah, just got a question. Somebody's asking if they can use that letter in France.
I don't see why not.
Okay.
I don't see why not. Obviously, you'd probably write it in French, but any other questions on that one, guys?
Can they use, if you're a tenant, can you use the same letter as well?
If you're a tenant,
Yes.
I would think so, but I would do the honourable thing and just discuss it with your landlord beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
If you get into any difficulties with that, I think come back to us and I will just check that with John Smith and see what John Smith says, but I would imagine so.
Also,
I would recommend you do this fairly quickly, because I think they will be trying to push the smart meters out as soon as they possibly can, because I think they want to try and regulate everything. And the more we can stop, the better. And that's actually quite an easy one to start with, and you can gain a bit of confidence when you know, in writing your letters by dealing with that one. I will give you copies of these letters, so to make life easy for you, you can just literally copy it and paste it, put your own details in, and use it if you prefer.
And of course, it's no problem if you're a leaseholder.
It's no problem if you're a leaseholder, I wouldn't have thought, no. And if you own the property, no problem whatsoever. Okay.
Hi, Shem, it's Aaron here.
Hello, Aaron. Hi.
I'm good. You see, when you write "I do not consent,"
Yes.
do you write it in English or do you keep it in the capital letters? Because the language of the government is the capital letters. So, are you creating a slight join there by using?
I don't think you are, because we've made it quite clear at the start and the end of our letters that we are standing under the jurisdiction of common law court.
Yeah, sure.
So I don't think so. Okay. I've not found a problem with it, with doing that.
What about
anybody, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, what about government housing? Is that an issue with the smart meters?
Again, I'm not sure about government housing. I would probably need to just check that with John Smith and get back to you, Aaron. If you'd like to drop me an email and just pop in any little questions like that, I can actually go back and ask him and see what he says. I would imagine, because you're living there, you have the right to say no to it, because actually it is affecting you.
Yes, yeah. Correct.
Okay, it's emitting signals that are going to affect you. So I would imagine that you have the right to say, no, thank you, I don't want it. That would be, to me, that would be logical.
Yeah.
Now, with the electoral... Sorry?
Yeah, can I just say, for somebody mentioned France, I actually live in France.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I've got a sign on the front of my gate for the contractors, because they over here they do tend to want to break in and do things like that. Well, my meter is actually inside, so it's in and out, not here, and they come in, they've been warned, and it's under their full commercial liability, of course. So in France, for those that don't know, nobody can actually come into your property without your permission. And that includes the gendarmes as well. Unless there's a crime being committed, of course.
Yeah, that's useful to know, actually, Jack. Yeah.
The other thing is... is when someone mentioned about I do not consent in capital letters. In fact, every contract that they write in legalese is basically in capital letters, and it's a glossa. For anybody who don't know glossa, try and look it up. I think you know something, Shem, because you're using full colon Shem, full colon Allison. Yes?
Yeah, 100%,
you know about that?
Jack.
I know a little bit, yes.
Okay, it's called correct sentence syntax part I'll say grammar.
Yes. So what would your thoughts be, Jack, on putting the "I do not consent" all in capitals? Would that concern you?
It wouldn't concern me, no, because that's not really joined out. It's, if you want, you could actually go down and prove all their contracts wrong because they're written in adverb verb. But that's a subject on its own, not for newbies.
American Sign Language at its best.
Yeah, we'll come back to that another time, guys. I'm going to come and consult you about some of those things, Jack.
Okay.
Right. So here's what I put for the electoral register. I've been quite clear and to the point, hopefully. So I said, please remove my details and those of my family from the electoral register. That is, all the names listed at the above address. And of course, you will just tweak that to suit yourselves. I or we now stand under the jurisdiction of the common law court and statutory legislation no longer applies. In addition, all the details, or I've put, as the details were obtained by criminal coercion, i.e. threat of harm or loss, your own data protection rules must be applied, i.e. the data must be removed on request, because actually most people have been criminally coerced into putting their names on the electoral roll, because when the form comes to you through the post, on the UK one certainly, and on the Isle of Man one, it actually says it is a criminal offence not to complete this and return it. So they've used criminal coercion as well. I have put, because I'm being reasonable and I want to remain in honour, you may keep historical records and historical financial records, but you no longer have permission to use my or our legal fictions or my or our power of attorney. I or we no longer consent to be governed. Proof of our standing is enclosed. And then what I do with my letters, I include a copy of my common law court card, okay, a copy of the legal fiction information that comes with that. So they've actually got proof of your standing. Now, as of a couple of weeks ago, there is now a common law court document that you can download, and I would recommend that you do download it and have a look at it. That's the one I mentioned earlier, that proves that common law court jurisdiction is superior to statutory court jurisdiction. This was the document that I said was presented to world governments. None of them rebutted it. Okay, so you can include a copy of that with your letter if you wish. If you also wish, you can put a link to your local data protection laws. That's the UK one. I think that the Isle of Man's got its own separate one, and I dare say if you're in France or somewhere else, they've probably got their own page as well. And then I've continued this by saying the reason that I feel this is essential to my continued well-being is as follows. I or we no longer support a government who do not represent my views and who abuse the authority given to them. I do not agree with decisions that are being made on my behalf, including. Now, what I've done next is I've given them a whole, in my version, I gave them an absolute load of things that I wasn't happy with. You don't have to put all this lot in, of course, all this purple stuff. I just wanted to make it absolutely clear that I was really not very happy with what the government was doing, and I have listed so many things. I could have probably written 20 pages of things I'm not happy with, but I limited myself to 2, and that took restraint. I was being very restrained, so I've said I'm not happy with the unlawful system of taxation. I'm not happy with the transparency and the accountability of government. I'm not happy with their COVID-19 lockup measures. I don't like all the business of locking down the elderly with little emotional or physical support. Blah, de blah. I don't like the prison system because it's a revolving door. I don't like the chemtrails being sprayed over my head, and so on. And the last and most important one of these, over recent months and years, most of our unalienable rights have been removed or abused. They are inherent sovereign natural rights that have existed long before the creation of the state, and they cannot be taken away, diminished, altered, or levied by the state, except by due process of law. You should be used to hearing that by now. Nor can any unalienable right be fundamentally removed or waived by contract, whether by non-disclosure, which is fraud, and unenforceable in law, or knowingly by sufferance, which is contrary to the spirit of the law and prejudicial to sovereignty. These rights must be restored in full. So if you want to put a rant in there, feel free. Maybe I should have been more restrained. Are you going to ask me something there, Richard? Or are you just laughing at my big list of rants?
I'm certainly laughing. And I want to see the 20-page letter, actually.
The important bits actually are the top and the bottom of this, rather than your rants in the middle. But I personally, depending who I'm writing to, I like to take the opportunity to educate people if I can. Depends where, depends how far I've got with my letter writing. But for the electoral roll one, I think I got a bit carried away because I was kind of hoping that they'll pass it on to other people to read. Yes, Richard?
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions actually coming in. Mike says the notice to principal and agent inclusion, is that in place of the notice text at the top?
Probably, yes.
Okay. Another thing to put, maybe all terms of grammar are under my jurisdiction. Sabrina saying?
Don't know about that one. Don't know about that one. I always just say, I always make it quite clear and say standing under the jurisdiction of the common law court or words to that effect, and actually state what my jurisdiction is, so that in absolutely no doubt, Richard.
Yeah. Okay, Friday's saying, for this situation, can you explain what I should do in the situation of my husband wishing to remain with his person, but with myself and my children wishing to be removed?
Remove yourself and your person and leave your husband to it, I would say.
So
Personally.
remove yourself and your children, correct?
Remove yourself and your kids, yes. It's a bit harder if you have shared property, and a little bit harder if you have shared mortgage.
Yes, that's what
but I personally would personally do it anyway, because I think you've got more protection under the common law court.
So we do have a shared mortgage, and also we are part ownership as well with a housing organisation. So it's a bit complicated, that.
Yeah, I think the best thing there would probably be to email me Friday. And
yeah, I might book some time with you if that's okay, if you don't mind.
If I don't have the immediate answer to your question, which I might not, what I will do is I will go to the other guys in common law court or to John Smith and ask them for you and come back to you with an answer. I wouldn't want to give you an answer if I'm not absolutely sure about it.
Yeah.
Because you need to get it right. If it's not straightforward, don't guess.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I continue, Richard?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So I or we do not consent to any of the above practices. To try to force these things on an unwilling electorate is acting ultra vires, i.e. outside of the authority given. Now that's a phrase you might like to note, ultra vires. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce that. I think it's ultra vires. And it means that the person who's doing this is acting outside of their authority. Okay. There's a lot of people doing that in government at the moment. Mm-hmm. Retaining our details on the electoral register against our wishes would be malfeasance in public office, for which you would be held liable in your private individual capacity. So again, by having the first name and by stating that, it means if they don't comply with your wishes, we can take them to a common law court. Any attempt to force me or us to accept the position of a legal fiction would be fraud and criminal coercion. So this bit's quite important. Get your wording right. I've kind of confused myself a bit here with the my and the we and the I and the we, but you get the idea. I or we are sovereign individuals and we deserve better from our elected representatives and civil servants. We do not consent to these abuses. We, the people, are the creator of the government and as such, its master, not the other way around. So I'm telling them exactly what I think. Please confirm that you have removed my or our details from the electoral register, the current one, within 14 days. Thank you. You need to give them a decent amount of time to remove the information, particularly with the current lockup, to remain in honour. Okay. If things are joint, then you need to get all the adults whose names we are talking about to sign the document, because otherwise it will come back to you and they will just ask you for the other people to sign the agreement. So if you want to get the whole household off, and there's 2 adults and 3 children, you need the signatures of the 2 adults. Now, if you're writing to land registry, which was, you remember from my earlier list, so on one of the earlier lists, you'll do the usual top and bottom. And for writing to land registry, this is what I did to try and get my land out. I have to say land registry proved particularly difficult because it was a solicitor who wrote back to me. But in the end, it didn't really matter, because the fact that you've transferred the land to common law court and you have the documentation to prove that does mean you can get your council tax and your mortgage sorted. You don't actually have to have your land out and off their listing, as long as they have been notified that it's under common law court, and as long as you can prove it's under common law court. So I had some very long letters going between me and the solicitor. I think I got quite a bit too cocky in the end, but I never got any, you know, I didn't get any threats or anything back. He was actually very civil. So, okay. So what did I put in that letter? The middle part of the letter said notice, re property. Put the deed number in it so they know the document you're talking about. I am a living man or living woman standing solely under the jurisdiction of the common law court. So that should be a capital C on common. The above land or property has now been listed under the common law court jurisdiction. I am not asking for your permission. The transfer has already taken place. Please amend your records accordingly. Thank you. Please acknowledge receipt of this letter within 7 days. So we're doing the usual thing. We are sending it signed for. We need to keep our little postage proof. We staple our postage proof to our letter. We're asking for an acknowledgement, okay? And we're giving them a decent amount of time to do the task in hand. In this instance, it's only 7 days because all they've got to do is actually take it off. To be honest, I don't think they do take it off, but as long as we have the proof that we've listed under common law court, that's the bit of paper we need. Now, something else hidden away under my page. Okay, now don't be tempted to fill in and return any of the forms that they send out to you. So one of the first things they did was they said to me, we can't remove your property unless you fill in this form. Now, when you fill in government forms, they are creating joinder with you. Don't be tempted to do it. I then wrote back to them and said, I will not be filling in a statutory form. You have been notified. This is all the notification you require. Now, what about your replies? Before we go on to the replies, would anybody like to ask any questions, Richard?
Yeah, there's a sort of discussion going on whether you should include the first name, CLC, or the name and the surname. With a colon or without a colon.
I would include both. What I normally do is I normally write, in the part where you normally sign it with your name, I would put Shem CLC, and then underneath it, I would put Shem of the family Allenson, or I would put colon Shem, all lowercase, space, colon Allenson, and then standing solely under the jurisdiction of the common law court.
Right. Okay. Thank you for clearing that up.
Okay. Anything else there, Richard?
No, that's all.
Okay. Anything else there, Jack? Anything you think I should have mentioned there?
Sorry, this is a strange computer to me. No, that's fine. The only thing, if you're using more than one Christian name, you put full colon your first Christian name, hyphen your second Christian name, and if you then can include your surname, put a colon again, full colon.
Right, thank you for clearing that up, Jack. That's useful because I didn't know that.
It comes under the correct sentence passe grammar, but that's a bit too complicated to go into now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Very much, Jack. That's very useful. I appreciate you telling us that. Right, let's have a look at replies next. Now, I haven't got too many started for today because there's a limit to, it takes me a while to actually do these. But I'm going to start you off on the process of conditional acceptance to be having a think about, and then what we'll do is we'll address some conditional acceptance letters next week. The reason we're not in any hurry to this is, remember, you've got quite a lot of homework to do already You've got a big long list of things that you need to get together, create your files. You can be doing your smart meter, you can be signing yourself off the electoral register and so forth. So there's quite a bit you can be getting on with. By then, we can start looking at conditional acceptance. Now, conditional acceptance, just so you've got a little bit to be thinking about, is a way of dealing with a letter that comes back to you that says something like, you owe us £250 for your income tax. We need you to pay the £250 for your income tax. Now, what you do with letters like that is you would write back to them with a heading saying conditional acceptance, or this is what I've done, and it's actually worked very effectively. What I've done is I've started my letters off with the usual thank you for your letter of the date. This letter was addressed to the legal fiction and not to myself, the living woman, just to make it quite clear that I'm not accepting the position of a legal fiction. The contents of this letter have been noted and will be kept on file, so I would always include that. I will go over that again next week. I've just not had a chance to do it this week. And then I will do my conditional acceptance text. So I would put something along the lines of, in order for me to consider your claim, please provide the following foundation evidence. And you can include whatever you think is appropriate for the claim that they're making. So for mine, I've included lots of different things. So I've said things like, please can you prove you have the authority to request this? In fact, we've withdrawn the authority for them to do it. So now, or you'll have done that in your previous letter, so they can't prove that. Withdrawn your authority. Please provide the proof of jurisdiction. So we're asking them to prove that we're in statutory jurisdiction. They can't prove it because we've actually already sent them a piece of paper that proves we are within the common law court jurisdiction. Okay, do you see where I'm going with this? Proof of consent. Well, we've withdrawn our consent. Because we've withdrawn our consent, they can't prove that either. If you think I owe you money, provide a proof of a contract. Well, do you remember in a previous session we talked about what a lawful contract was? And the lawful contract, of course, is things like it must have 2 wet signatures on it, or it must be witnessed by 2 members of government staff or a 3rd independent witness. It must state all the terms and conditions of the contract. It must be fair, and so on. So there's loads of things to do with contracts that they must have to make it lawful, and we've covered all that in a previous session. So my letters will include some of these. So in the next session I do with you, I'm going to show you some more examples of letters. Now, you could also ask for a copy of a lawful invoice. What is interesting, and I found quite interesting, and I'll show you some of these next time, is a lot of their so-called invoices, and you'll notice I use the I use that term loosely, are not really invoices. And that is because there's no pound sign anywhere on the piece of paper denoting that they're actually talking about currency, or the figure is in a box. Now, if a figure is in a box, as far as I'm aware, if a figure is in a separate box, that actually takes it off the page. So that is not a lawful invoice. Jack's nodding there. I think Jack probably knows a little bit about this, because he's a little bit ahead of me on all of this, or probably quite a lot ahead of me. So it's very important when they're asking you for something, you can say to them, where is a lawful invoice? Please prove to me that there is a lawful invoice.
Sorry, Shem, can you explain that again?
Sorry, do you want me to go through the lawful invoice again?
Yes, please, yeah.
Yeah. If somebody's asking you for money, look at what they've provided you in the way of an invoice or a statement saying that you owe money, because quite often they are unlawful, and there's lots of things that can make them unlawful. So it could be the way that it's written. It could be the fact that there's no pound sign indicating that what you're actually looking at is currency. So it might say 250 as numbers in a box, but there isn't a pound sign anywhere. So it's not. So are they asking you for 250 sugar cubes? Okay. If a figure is in a box, I believe it actually takes it off the page as well. So invoices have to be laid out in a very particular way. And I'm going to do a little bit more research on this to explain this to you at a later date. I know some of the rules of this, but I don't know all of it as yet. But
Okay.
you can certainly ask for a lawful invoice.
Thank you very much.
Now, also, the other things that you can be thinking about when you're doing your conditional acceptance are, does it contravene your unalienable rights, what they're asking for? Does it contravene your human rights, or does it go against the Nuremberg Code? Those are all things worth considering. Anything that is holding you in slavery is going against your human rights. So you can include statements like that in your letters as well. Another thing to have a think about is, was the data obtained lawfully in the first place? So in other words, did you give permission for the payment details to, for example, be passed on to your employer? Let's say we're talking about attachment of earnings. Did you actually give them permission to give your payment details to your employer to extract money from you? Okay. Did you give them permission to sell your details on to a private bailiff so they can then come round and bully you and try to extract money from you? So just a couple more things you can think about there. Now, you could also ask for proof of certain things. So in some of my letters, I have, for example, asked for, just because I've written so many and I got to the point where I was getting a bit exasperated, you can ask for proof of things like, please explain to me how a legal fiction is used to obtain joinder and payments. I've asked for proof that a dead legal fiction is able to use the services provided or to run a business, because actually a legal fiction really is a piece of paper. A straw man is actually a piece of paper. It's not a human being, it's not you. Ask them to prove that you have contravened some lawful legislation. Notice I use the word lawful and not the word legal. Now, you could also ask them to prove that payments go towards specific things. So, for example, can you prove that road tax goes towards road building? Can you prove that my national insurance payments go towards pensions? You'll never get a reply back on these things because they actually can't prove it. Okay. So this really is part of your conditional acceptance letter. Now, I'm going to talk a lot more about this next week. What you follow this with is a statement to the effect that if you are unable to provide this information and provide the following foundation evidence, that is your tacit agreement that no such evidence exists. So no reply, no proof means no evidence. If no such evidence exists, you do not owe the amounts stated. And that works every single time, guys. That's how I've got out of everything. Absolutely everything. It works every single time. I've even been right up to the Attorney General's office and asked for proof, 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 proof. Never got the letter back, and they now leave me alone, so I don't get the invoices or bills anymore. Well, they're not invoices, they're fake invoices. I don't even get those anymore. So if they can't provide the proof, that is their tacit agreement that no such proof exists and you do not owe what they are claiming you owe. Any questions on that, folks? We're going to talk much more about this next week, and I will actually go through some examples of letters on this.
Shall I have one? I mean, I can see where that falls with the likes of, you know, mortgage companies, perhaps, you know, not charging us fairly in the first place.
I will actually do mortgage in more detail next week, because what you need with the mortgage company, what you need to do to cancel your mortgage really is ask them some quite specific details and ask for foundation evidence on specific things. and it's certain things that will invalidate the mortgage, which is why I'm not covering mortgages today. I will try and put you together an example of a mortgage letter, and it's things like you would like to see the original mortgage contract with the dates and the signatures and so on and so forth on them. And there's a few other things that you can actually ask for with mortgages. So we'll come back
just on that point then, why if they're aware that this is unlawful, why are they doing it still?
Because they're con artists. Because they're con artists and they can get away with it. To give you an idea of just what con artists they are, I had a joint mortgage with somebody and I managed to contest it beautifully, no problem. They agreed that they couldn't provide the evidence, and so I managed to stop the payments. The person I then had the mortgage with was terrified of the, them coming to chase him. So they basically criminally coerced him into starting up the mortgage again unlawfully. Now, what's interesting is they managed to start up a joint mortgage again, even though I hadn't consented to it, so they did it without my consent, and he is paying it. How is that? It won't do him any good because the property it's done and dusted and dealt with, and actually they don't have any contract with me, and I didn't give them permission to restart it. But they think they have the right to restart it, even though I haven't given them permission. So they will try anything.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah, so what I was going on to say was that my question was more about electricity. Obviously, they provide the infrastructure, they employ people, and they generate the electricity. So where is the unlawfulness in that as such?
Right. I'm going to do separate sessions on gas and on the electricity, because I believe there is a way of persuading government to pay it for us. I'm still looking into that at the moment. I know people who've done it, but I think we'll come back to that when I have it a bit clearer in my own head. I've got various brains to take on that one. We're going to start with things like, we've done the smart meters and the electoral roll, which I think is perhaps the place to start. Next, I think we'll look at things like income tax rates, company tax, that kind of thing, and the other sort of straightforward taxes, and then we'll go on to some of the other things.
Right, okay, thank you.
Shall I carry on, Richard? Is there anybody else?
Sorry, yeah, there's a couple
Okay.
of questions. Tony's had to leave. He says he's got to go to a work meeting, but he's saying it would be really helpful at the end of these wonderful meetings to zip up the slides and share out at the end. So, Tony, that gets done anyway. Just make sure that we have your email address.
Yeah.
I think Laura had to go as well.
Yeah, I will actually produce for you a big pack of letters if I can.
I think that'll be
with lots of useful little statements. But yeah. I will be picking a few brains as well, the people who are perhaps a bit further ahead than me, to just get them to look over some of those statements and get advice from other people who know more than I do, just to make sure those are absolutely right, guys. The bits I've shown you today, as far as I'm aware, that is absolutely correct. But I like to be sure that the information I'm presenting to you is absolutely correct before I present it. I don't want to give you some method of dealing with these things that's going to get you into any deep water.
Okay. Laura's, I think, also had to go, so she's missed, no, she's there, but she's missed the last half an hour. She's saying for council tax, the electoral roll, etc., she can't list the property under common law because she doesn't own it. But does that mean she cannot be removed from council tax, etc.?
No, she can still be removed from council tax because it is still unlawful. Once she exits the jurisdiction, they don't have the authority or the jurisdiction to make her pay it.
What if she has obviously a rental agreement with her landlord to say that she would be responsible for council tax?
That's an agreement with her landlord. That is not an agreement with the government.
Okay. Okay. Marika has said this could also be used for fines, I suppose. For example, the fine when you don't quarantine for 14 days when you're returning from abroad.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. Although I think they'll jump on you like a ton of bricks with that one, but you can certainly try. Try not to end up in court if you can, because if you end up in court, it's quite difficult, remember, when you're in their playpen. All the other members of the playpen, remember, all work for the courts, so really you want to try not to end up in court. If she gets into difficulty with that one, I would suggest she comes to have a talk with us. If I can't deal with it, then I will pass her on to somebody who can.
Fantastic. Just a couple more. Lee's asking, well, to me privately, but I'm assuming he doesn't mind sharing it with you. Do we have the means to counter vaccines through these processes, and should this become front and centre considering the lockdown? At the minute, you know, vaccines are not mandatory. So,
yeah. Well, I actually don't think they can make vaccines mandatory, but they will try and do it using force. But they will try and do it using force rather than law, because they don't have the law on their side. And this is why we need as many people as possible, I think, to sign up for the common law courts, because the more of us there are, the better.
Absolutely. I've got one from, sorry, do you want to?
Sham, I just wanted to ask that actually from other people's, the idea is kind of, oh, you're not paying your council tax, so you're not supporting the support of elderly, so you're selfish, you this and that. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I do get people saying that sometimes, and what I do is I explain to them how the straw man came about, and the fact that at birth, when they create the birth certificate, there are treasury bonds created at the same time, and these bonds are linked to the national insurance number. And for each of us, there are massive funds with hundreds of millions of pounds in that governments access. So we have more than paid for everything we will ever use many times over. Okay. So the money doesn't go what you think it goes on, guys. It's a big con.
Yeah.
So you're not being selfish. What you are doing is actually demanding to have back the rights that were yours in the first place, the rights that were unlawfully taken from you. You are asking not to be a slave in a system that you do not wish to be a slave in. Why should you be a slave to a system when that is against your unalienable rights and against your human rights? So that would be my response to that one, Richard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I've got Hedy. I live in Jersey, and I would like to know whether I should apply for the British or international CLC card.
Have a chat with John Smith on that one. I'm not sure. Or drop me an email, and I will ask him for you. You could. I think when you get a normal CLC card, like this is mine. I think what they normally do is they will put your birth country there. But if you want to travel widely, then he normally would recommend that you get an international card.
And how does the international one differ?
It's just, I think it's just a different colour, actually. I think that's the only difference as far as I'm aware, and that you can travel all over on it.
Does it still list the country of birth?
I'm not sure. I'm not absolutely sure, Richard. I think drop us an email and I will ask John those questions.
Okay, fantastic. There is evidence that taxes never go to services we think they do. For US, it goes to the bankers. Yes. Yeah.
In fact, the taxes, money that we pay, goes to so many immoral and abhorrent things. If you knew where the money goes, you would never want to pay into any taxes. So our money ends up going to white-collar crime, slavery, prostitution, paedophilia, drug trafficking, people trafficking, things like mortgage fraud. I mean, there's so many of these crimes that are going on, Richard, to the tune of trillions and trillions and trillions. Our taxes in comparison are relatively small, but the reason that we need to all sign out and get off the electoral roll is to make government realise that we will not take this any longer, and so that we can individually withdraw our hundreds of millions from their control. Doesn't mean we get it, unfortunately, but it does help to limit their access to it, I believe. So we're telling them we're not happy.
Sure. Okay. That's fantastic. One, we've got loads of, we've got 13 new messages, but just before we get there, if we're expecting our taxes to be used like wholly for the roads or wholly for infrastructure, is it the government or the council that have to prove that?
I think it's probably the council who's doing it that has to prove it. But I've asked on many occasions for them to prove that the money I pay in national insurance, for example, goes towards my pension, or money that I pay in road tax goes towards the road, and I've never ever had a reply. They say they can't prove it.
Does it wholly have to go towards the roads or your pension, or?
I don't know, Richard. They're very vague about it deliberately, and even the staff that work in those departments don't know. And I think that's part of the con. The whole con, I think, is that the only people who really know what's going on are the people right at the top. Right. The rest of the people within government, I think, they do their jobs, they do as they're told, but they don't have the whole picture. And because they don't have the whole picture, they are literally just doing the job that they're given.
Okay, I've got loads and loads of about 20 messages almost. I think probably it's.
Shall I continue and then we can start questions?
Yeah,
I think I'm nearly there, Richard.
Let's wrap up and then we can just open it up to questions.
Yeah, we've not got too much more to do today. So there's just a few useful terms there that you might like to know. I will send you a copy of this. So we've got malfeasance, misfeasance, and nonfeasance. And I will give you a wrap up of this slide. Criminal coercion and fraud. So I've got some definitions there for you to have a look at that you might want to include in some of your letters. So I'll let you read that at your leisure. My contact information, exactly the same as the previous talks. I would appreciate a donation, but only if you can afford it. Links to previous sessions. There will be downloads available for a short time only, because I think, are they there for 7 days, Ella? Is that right? 7 days they're up?
7 days, but I think we are going to open that BitChute like channel just to put these videos.
Yeah, so there'll be a BitChute channel where they will be downloadable. Okay, thank you. Okay, so any questions, anybody? Anybody want to ask anything?
Yeah, so just back on that international card versus a British card. I mean, you seem to indicate that it enables you to travel. Is that something you need to check, or is that something that?
I think you can actually travel on both, but it might depend where you're going. I will actually look that out for you. Are you on Telegram?
Yeah, I'm in that group now.
If you're in our Telegram group, what I will do is I will ask John Smith, and I will ask him about international travel.
Yeah.
And what the difference between the basic card and the international card is.
Because I haven't purchased it.
I will get back to that. I'll get back to you.
I just had a question about these crimes that you're talking about. Is there a good book that goes through these so that, you know, you could get some down to those, you know, this indication that our money doesn't go where it says? Is there like a good book on the market that?
I wish. The reason I know so much of this is because I know people like Bruce Lamb, who I've had some in-depth conversations with. Who's he? Sorry. He is a gentleman who is very, very astute on the financial side of things. I can look up his details. He is someone who wrote a very detailed report for government. I'll try and find you his report. He did an affidavit, actually, in which he listed lots of things and his gripes about the financial side of government. And I had very detailed conversations with him and other people.
Well, we can see it. We can see it now in the current system that, you know, our money has just been thrown on up to loads of research on to the NHS, but you know, in areas that I don't really agree with, to be honest.
Well, you only have to look at people like Bill Gates, World Health Organization, United Nations, and so forth, and wonder where their funding all comes from, because ultimately the funding for those things comes from us.
Yeah,
we are the ones paying for it. Who's been paying for the wars?
Yeah,
we are the ones that have been paying for the wars. That money doesn't come from nowhere.
Yeah. Okay.
So, to my mind, that is a massive amount of evidence in our faces.
Yeah.
The money isn't going to what it should be going to.
No. Okay, I'll let other people answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, anyone?
I think Courtney just wrote in the chat about using CLC card for traveling. So if Courtney, can Courtney actually discuss that about using CLC card for traveling?
Sorry, can you speak up, Ella?
Yeah, I think Courtney in the box has just said that John Smith used his CLC card for travelling.
Yeah. Was that the basic card, Courtney, or was that the international?
It was the basic one, I think, but I'll just get Courtney in now.
Yeah.
Courtney, are you there?
Yep. Yeah, as far as I know, it was the basic one. It was with EasyJet last year. He missed his flight from the Isle of Man to the UK. So it was proof. But the bigger prize is that a lady in Australia used her common law court card to establish residency in Australia. That was last year. So if you do a bit of digging, and obviously John's unbelievably busy, but you can feel this is getting traction for people who are educated. And that card has been used to establish residency in Australia. So it's beginning slowly.
Yeah, the thing about the common law court card as well is it really will replace a driving licence and a passport. And it can be used for identification where you would normally use a driving licence or a passport.
And also, Shem, you were sharing these little cards on Telegram group for children, you know, saying that they are under common law jurisdiction. Is it that something we need to send our children with to school?
I think if the threat of mandatory vaccinations pops up, then definitely. If I had a child, I don't have any children, but if I had, and the threat of mandatory vaccinations were popping up, I think I'd have them with a little thing round their neck with the common law court card on one side, and you will be liable to prosecution, words to that effect, on the other side. I have actually got a card ready designed for that, if anybody is particularly worried about that. In the worst case scenario, I might even consider removing my child from the school system and look at homeschooling, actually, rather than have them assaulted in that manner. But that's my personal opinion. I think we need to hold people personally liable, hold them liable in their private capacities.
Yeah. Thank you, Courtney, and thank you, Shem, for that.
Any more questions?
Any more questions? If you just want to unmute yourself, I think we've got a few minutes longer. While people are sort of unmuting themselves, I'm just going to say that all of these sessions are recorded. So it does take us a few days to actually get the video rendered and actually get sent out to you, but they will be available for 7 days until we get the channel sorted out.
What might be useful, guys, is if you've got questions and things that you think I haven't covered, please just drop me an email with the question in. And what I can try to do is put together a document that lists some of the quite common questions with an answer. And then if I don't know, I can ask people like Jack or Courtney or John Smith. And then we can actually issue a sheet of questions with the answers and even put them up on the Common Law Court website, because all the questions that people are asking are actually really quite sensible ones, and it would be nice to have the answers somewhere available. And what's, you know, we're going to get asked these questions again.
Yeah, the questions are useful. I mean, you know, we are sharing Shem's email address here, so it's Thie, Thie.
No, not that one for questions.
Okay,
IOM, yeah.
At commonlawcourt.com.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. If you've got any questions about wanting to receive the videos and the recordings, just send emails to ella.eg@pm.me. Okay?
Quick question, Richard. On the previous talk, I think you'd put Ella_EG. Is it Ella_EG or is it Ella dot?
It is underscore, but it doesn't matter.
Either will get to you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You confused me, that was all.
Any more questions, anyone?
Just one question. You say that there's a Telegram group or a Telegram group chat?
Yes, there is, Mike.
Is there a link to that, or how do I?
I think if you email Ella, I think Ella will sign you up to that.
Okay, cool.
And then what I try to do is I try to just log in there intermittently according to how busy I am, Mike, and just deal with questions. And also what we all do is we're posting each other links and bits of information and things that we think might be useful.
Right. Nice one. Thanks.
Fantastic. Now, Shem, do you just want to cover what you're going to cover on the next session?
Right. I think on the next session, what I'll do is go through in some more detail conditional acceptance letters and how I've written them, and give you some examples of wording and phrases and things to make it really easy for you to actually put your own letters together.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so I think the next session is going to be Friday next week at 3 o'clock.
I've got quite a few people whose brains I wish to pick before then, and then having done some brain picking, I will then try and put some sessions together on other topics. So if you think there is a topic that you would particularly like some information on, do let me know, and I'll try and put something together for you.
Brilliant, thank you. Last chance for questions, because I think we're running actually bang on time.
Heidi?
Yes, hi there. I live in Jersey, and obviously there's slight variance, but I'm particularly interested with international travel. Once one has signed up with the common law court and got one's card, etc., would you still need to travel with your passport? Because obviously not all countries are going to recognise this. I mean, if you travel to India, for example, it would be a bit risky not to take your passport. I mean, how does that work? Does anybody have any experience of that?
I think what John would probably recommend is that you phone up all the airlines and things first and ask the question, because I don't think I can actually give you the answer as to what every airline or every travel company would actually suggest, Heidi. So I think you'd need to do some detailed inquiries first. If you're sure you can travel without needing your passport, I would travel without it.
Is it recommended that once we're sort of fully signed up to the common law court, that we actually do away with our passport? Because obviously that's, should we say, connecting us to the legal side of things rather than the common law.
I've still got mine, but I have to say it is buried so deep that nobody would ever find it.
Right.
So I doubt if I will ever need it again. And I think when people do get signed up to all of these things, you probably never will need your driving license or your passport again. But what we need numbers, Heidi. We need as many people joined up as possible, because the more numbers that we have, the more people start coming out of the jurisdiction and saying, look, we do not consent to all this nonsense. We are not having it. If thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of us do this, they will have no choice but to accept these cards, because there will be people every day wanting to travel on them. And there will be people every day who will be saying, well, if you don't accept this card, we'll challenge you in the common law court.
Right. Okay.
Common law courts are now starting in all of the countries. Okay, there are all of the countries that we've got listed. There are, at last count, I think there was at least 113 countries on John Smith's list who have people registered, and a good proportion of them are now starting running common law courts, where they are going to be holding people liable in their private individual capacities. Okay. And we're going to start with the guys at the top. Those are the ones we will be prosecuting first.
Have any of those already gone through and been successful, Liz?
Oh yes, yeah. We're still waiting for some of the enforcement. Enforcement has been a little bit harder because we're in the process of looking at police force, military, prisons and so forth. So there's lots of things that are still to come. But the Isle of Man is, the common law court is growing at such a quick rate that I actually don't think it's going to be very long before we've got those things, guys. I mean, there are so many people joining.
We have our own police force.
Eventually, yes, that's the plan. It will actually be a peace force, not a police force.
Right.
It will be a peace force.
And so, just to give a bit of, sorry to keep going on, but a bit more background in terms of how many people are already using this process and living sort of common law court life kind of thing? You know, how
well, I can't give you actual individual numbers. All I can tell you is what I know, in that there's over 113 countries involved now, and we have a lot of people from those 113 countries joined up. But it is actually changing by the second. There are now people joining by the second, by the minute. So that's how quickly it's developing, Friday, because people realise that this is probably one of the few ways where you're actually going to get a lawful remedy, because the documents that are being produced, if you do them in the right way, you can take them into a court and the court has to recognise them. If the judge doesn't recognise them, we can hold him to account and we can prosecute him, because common law always stands above statutory law.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And they know that. They know that. And most of the senior judiciary won't take on. They won't take on the people. Remember that common law court is not, it's not any one individual. Common law court is you guys. Common law court is the people. It is the court of the people. No senior judge is going to want to take on all the people, because we are the ones that gave him the authority. He can't take us all on.
No. Okay.
We are the common law court. You, I, and everyone else who joins, we are the common law court.
So how to keep asking, but how many years have these cards been issued for? Like, how's that?
I think it's been about 3 years now. I think they've been doing this.
Right. Okay.
So actually, in timescale, not very long, but in terms of numbers, we are going like this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, Jack, did you want to say something?
Yes, common law's been around for centuries.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So it's not a new concept. But what I would say is common law is very simple. It's only that the statutory system is very complicated in the way they've set it up. So we have to, although we can learn common law, and I would suggest that you take one piece at a time, because there's so much to learn about the dishonourable people on the other system, that we have to get around their tricks and traps which they have. So it's not hard, but if you're jumping from one thing to another, eventually you become so confused. I've been in common law now for just about 10 years. And when I first started, it was a headache. I didn't know where I was coming to going, because I was listening to this and I was listening to that. And then eventually you'll discern and you'll find out the people who really know what they're talking about. Somebody mentioned about income tax. A good guy to explain that would have been Michael Bernacia. Has anybody heard of him?
No.
Michael Bernacia, he used to live in Spain.
Yeah.
And he came back from Spain, and they presented him with a tax bill. And to cut a long story short, he deregistered after a little shenanigans with them. And then they sent him a check, which they owed him, that was in the system. So there is a way around these things. It's just that they put up so many barriers, you have to learn how to combat them. And our system is very simple. When Shem says about the conditional acceptance, that's a very powerful tool, the three-letter system. It's a very powerful tool, because you're putting the onus on them to supply the proof. You know, and if they can't come back with it, then you've given time to, and they haven't, then they've tacitly agreed. So there you have it, simply.
They will try and wriggle out of it, of course, as they do. You know.
Jack. Jack.
Yes. Who am I talking to? I can't see. Oh, Richard, sorry.
Yeah. Would you like to share a list of books on the common law that you have found to be particularly useful?
I've got a common law manual, how to convene a common law court, etc.
Yeah.
And it's in a sort of PDF form, I believe. I don't read many books, to be quite honest, because I find I learn more by videos, listening and seeing. How our senses are to see something, to hear something, and to read something. Okay, that's how we learn. And we think in pictures, if you think about it. If I said to you, can you remember this morning when you got up and you had your breakfast? A picture has come up in your mind to say, oh, you can see yourself having your breakfast, yes?
Yeah. I think actually, Jack, that the PDF that you've got is from one of the books I've done a picture of on the previous slides.
Okay.
So I think I've already mentioned that one. I think it's in one of the other two talks, Richard. I know which book he's talking about. Yeah, it is good. It is good.
Some of the people I sort of looked at when I first started was people like Guy Taylor. If anybody's heard of Guy Taylor, he's deceased now, but that man had done so much to promote common law. John Harris, again, he's no longer with us, sadly, but he really delved into it. Yeah. And other people like that is where you get your knowledge from.
Yeah.
And sometimes you go into so many different things, you tend to forget some of the simple things you used before, like driving license. If I was to be stopped by a policeman in England, and the first thing I would ask him, are you under your oath as a police constable or a police officer? And I'd ask him for his name, and if he'd give me his collar number, here's just a little tip I would use, I would give him my birth certificate number, because it's got all the details on there. So I'd make a joke of it, something like, well, your parents weren't very imaginative when they gave you your name, were they? 1, 2, 5, 6, or whatever his number is. I have a joke with them because I want to keep it on a nice footing. So I'm just that kind of person. I'm always clowning about. But when they start getting serious, well, then will I also get serious? And I'd say, well, I'm sorry, I don't. If you're not a police constable, I don't really want to talk to a police officer because you're acting ultra virus, as you said, Jen. Excuse me, as you said.
I'm picking this man's brains next week, Richard.
That won't be hard.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jack. Shem, thank
You're
you
welcome.
very much.
My pleasure.
Can I just get... Sorry, guys. Jack, may I have clarification on Michael's name, how you spell it? Michael Abernicier, the gentleman from Spain?
Michael, yes, you understand. My Michael,
right.
Of Bernicia. Just put it in Google. It doesn't matter if you misspell the last name, it'll come up. Or if you're on MeWe, go to... If Shem likes to direct you to MeWe on my site, it will be on there.
Or you'll find him.
But there's so many. I mean, I've got a terabyte of information on my PC. I've got 3 PCs actually, which has all got full up with information. So, but yeah, if you go Google it. He's just put in Michael Bernicia and he's got loads of things.
He's also on the Great British Mortgage Swindle.
Yes, that's excellent, mate.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.
So take it one step at a time. Remember, the longest journey starts with the smallest steps.
The single most important thing, I think, guys, is to get organised before you start, really. Because by the time you finish, you're going to have one big fat file. So get organised, get all your paperwork organised and filed properly, get it all labelled, and be absolutely consistent and be organised when you're dealing with all your paperwork. Keep all those postal slips staple them to the right piece of paper, because believe me, if you don't do that, you will regret it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, I just wanted just to sort of wrap up. What sort of vision are you imagining for the future in
For
terms
all of us,
of common law, for all of us, for the world?
I think what those of us in common law court are visualizing for the future is that we will have a world eventually where all disputes are dealt with mainly by the common law courts, or certainly disputes between individuals. And not only will they be dealt with by the common law courts, but because they're being dealt with by these proper courts, real courts, with a jury, you will get a much fairer result. And you will also get a result that's decided relatively quickly, so people's lives won't be ruined and trashed while they're going through court case after court case after court case, and they're being fleeced by all the different lawyers and the system to the tunes of sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds, but just so the lawyers can extend it and make it last a little bit longer. Because
so what do you see as a sort of reputable company then that acts reputatively? They provide a service and you pay for it, and should we only deal with those companies?
For what sort of thing?
I don't know. It sounds like we could probably get out of everything. It sounds.
Well, we're never going to get away with not having lawyers and solicitors and judiciary, I don't think. And in fact, we probably wouldn't want to, because I think the common law court really is designed for grievances between individuals. The lawyers, the solicitors and the judiciary and the other court system is probably best kept to use their expertise in dealing with things like corporate law and disputes between large companies and large organizations, and that is actually where their expertise lies, and that is where those people's skills are going to be required. So what we're saying is we're not necessarily wanting to do away with solicitors and lawyers or that court system, but we just want the whole system to be more efficient. And where there is a dispute between individuals, that can be taken out into a common law court and perhaps decided at a local level. Okay. Certainly, I think that's going to help things like the family courts, because at the moment, where there is a dispute, say within a married couple over child custody, what actually goes on there at the moment is unbelievably complicated, and it's so unfair on the entire family and the children. It's obviously a system that's not working.
I used to be a mediator for neighbours, and we got such great resolutions that came from the people I mediated without any lawyers involved at all. Yeah, there's definitely a better way.
So what I would like to see every country, every community around the world having its own little common law courts. That's what I personally would like to see. And I would like to see bigger communities like the Isle of Man or certain counties or whatever. I would like to see them working as functional units where perhaps all our strawman funds are actually used for the benefit of that community. And we all work together for the benefit of that community. And so that everything that is spent is completely transparent. Nothing is hidden from us, because the problem is the minute people start hiding information and not declaring information, that's where all the fraud starts. If you think about anything in government that's not completely transparent, that is where the fraud is. Why are they hiding these things? Why don't we know about them? There's something dodgy going on when people are not declaring things. Everything should be open and transparent.
Shem, thank you for an absolutely wonderful session.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Very much enjoy these.
Can I actually add one more thing?
Yeah.
I actually would like to see a future where we don't have money.
You know, my children always wish for that, because
I would.
Faraway tree, and that they have lands where you don't buy things with money. So yeah, that would be nice.
I would like to see a world without money where we actually exchange. There is a system called kindness credits that I know exists, where people actually exchange their sweat equity. Yeah. And they swap goods and services and no money is involved. I would like to see something like that, because that takes away that opportunity for abuse. It also means that perhaps 2 hours of my time is worth the same as 2 hours of your time.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I say just one thing? Because for me, it's like one thing I love about finding this common law court is that, because I had been searching for a while, and to me, the answer is in all of us. We have to self-govern. We have to come to agreement privately. I mean, we could get rid of things like child protective services if we all acted like adults, and no matter if we have differences, but we come together and we support each other, because just like they've made us the law merchant bankers, and that's how we should all be acting in ourselves anyway. So I agree with you. No money. Everything has been trusted because it belongs to all of us. Like somebody said in the answers in Genesis 1 is that the kingdom of Yah was given to us. We're all the sons and daughters of Adam. So this is our inheritance. We have the highest claim. Anyway, that's just all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the overall objective for the human race should really be to look after the planet, look after each other. Respect. In fact, my philosophy is the 3 R's. So you respect yourself, you respect other people, and you respect the planet. And I think if we all do that, we're going to have a better world. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Shem. If you've enjoyed this, please do donate to Shem, so that she can get this to as large an audience as possible.
Thank you.
Her PayPal is Thie, Thie, Eden at protonmail.com. We're going to be back here next Friday at 3 o'clock, where we're going to be focusing on some other things. In the meantime, do make sure that we have your email. If you want to be sent the slides, sent some of the template letters, sent a recording of this particular webinar, just make sure that you email ella.eg@pm.me, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So we have to get out of this now.